Welcome back, everybody. The Business Roundtable podcast, where we have some returning guests. My name is David Carr, your host and facilitator here. We have got a great topic tonight. For those of you who have checking in for the first time, we'll do brief introductions, and we're going to jump into our topic of power tonight, which we've kind of referenced and talked about in previous episodes. So again, David Carr here of Steward Your Business, where I'm here rooting for you and your team, helping you be the most intelligent leader and making sure that your teams are coming together to accomplish great things. We have Bill Hatch back with us. Welcome, Bill.
Thank you. Glad to be back.
Making it through school, I hear, and working on papers and all sorts of things.
Yeah, working on one of two final papers in one class and starting the first of 2 weeks of overlap with my next class.
Yeah,
eternal for some reason, the school decided that for some reason they thought it was a good idea to have overlapping weeks during the summer term.
Nice.
Yeah.
I miss those days. I miss those days.
Oh, yeah.
Oh, my goodness. Glad to have you back, Bill. And Doxy, welcome.
Thank you. Glad to be here. Always, I enjoy these Wednesdays talks, and get a chance to not only learn something new, but figure out that you don't sometimes know what you think you know.
Right.
So I enjoy it.
Yeah, no, we're so glad to have you back. And it was your idea, I think, you suggested this book, which I have in front of me here, that we're going to get into, The 48 Laws of Power by Robert Greene. So this has been an interesting concept because we've talked about power and we've talked about boundaries and how we're leading and how you show up as a leader. And so I thought it would be good. I have the book in front of me. And I'm just going to read that first paragraph, Doc C, of just this preface, and we're going to get into more about what power is in a little bit. But I think I'm super excited about this conversation. We'll see how far we get in this episode. This is definitely one you guys want to listen to and come back to because we're going to have many more episodes I foresee on this topic. But the book here in the preface actually just starts with this paragraph. I'm just going to read real briefly here. But the feeling of having no power over people and events is generally unbearable to us. When we feel helpless, we feel miserable. No one wants less power. Everybody wants more. In the world today, however, it's dangerous to seem too power hungry, to be too overt with your power moves. We have to seem fair, and decent. So we need subtle, congenial yet cunning, democratic and yet devious. So he's getting this preface of how we have to be. Now it's going to go into greater detail here, and I'm really going to enjoy hearing you, Doc C, lead us through this discussion of, this preface of power. I guess everybody wants power, or how does that show up? So I'm going to throw it to you, Doc C, to kind of lead us in here in our discussion tonight.
Absolutely. And, the reason why I picked this particular topic and I like to talk about it is that, whether you're an 8 to 5 employee looking to move up to management ranks and even move up even higher, you really have to understand how these 48 laws of power that Mr. Greene, of course, did a lot of extensive research on how the human mind works. And it's quite fascinating. And what we'll do tonight is kind of go through each law one by one. I know that we're probably not going to get to the 48 laws because there's so much information in each law that we will actually discuss, if that's all right with you two gentlemen.
Oh yeah. I agree. When I looked at all these titles, Doc C, there's like, whoa, there's a lot to these, and I think there's a preface of like, how do you use power, and there's some great concepts just here on the preface alone that we're going to pick apart. But Bill, what about you? What do you hear this idea of power? Is that a good thing, negative, bad thing? What's your thoughts initially as we're like? Well,
power is really a tool, like most others, and it's not so much how it's not so much the thing itself, but in what you do with it.
Mm-hmm.
If I hit somebody's thumb with a hammer, that tool is bad. But if I hit the nail on the head, then that tool did its job well. So it's definitely possible to use power well in such a way that you can do good with it.
Mm-hmm. Right.
You,
Go ahead, Doc.
yeah, I was just going to say, Bill, what's interesting about this topic, and of course, and I'm kind of feeding off of what you talked about earlier about your courses that you're taking. Now, if you think about that, who has the power, you or your college that you're taking these courses?
If I want what they've got.
Exactly. That is exactly the point of these laws, is because who really has the power? I went through there, and David, you went through colleges,
Yep.
and I 2 doctorates, and they all, each and every one of them, had the power, because I needed to get what I wanted out of that. And so there's some things that I had to learn along the way, and which is connected to these 48 laws of power, which we're going to address. And if you guys are ready to go, we'll get started.
Yeah. I do a question for you as we're jumping in here, because I think you made a point, Bill, and it talks about that in here in the preface, that power is essentially amoral. We'll get Doc C back. He disconnected for a minute. You just said that Bill, that it's kind of amoral. It's not good or bad, right? It's just how you're using that power.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah, I think so. Politics is a great example. Of people using their power, trying to get power for whatever their purposes are, and of course, the vast majority of people who get into politics are getting into it because they want to do what they feel is right, and best for the most people. And of course, the problem with politics is that we all disagree with each other on what's best. And
Sure.
Yeah. So yeah, I'm very intrigued, Doxy, on how we look at this and how we quote unquote play the game of power. And some people say, well, I'm not a player, but in reality, everybody's a player. Like you said, what do you want? Who has the power, right? We're all in this in some way, shape, or form.
Exactly. Can you hear me okay?
Yeah, you're good. You're good.
Yeah.
We lost you for a moment, but you're back.
I don't know what happened, but yeah, you know what? You're absolutely correct, and that's the purpose of what we're going through, is that you have to understand, you have to be able to weave yourself in and out of these laws that we are actually talking about. So let's dive right into it. Let's go to law number 1.
Okay.
Which is it says never outshine the master, and of course, and I'm going to talk a little bit about that and then see what you guys think about it.
Mm-hmm.
But it basically says that make your masters, whoever they are, which of course is your boss and whatnot, but appear more brilliant than they are. Never outshine them. Always put them, up above you, and that's our mistake sometimes. We actually don't want to do that. So, what are your thoughts, Bill? I'll start with you. Never outshine the master.
Well, my first thought when I saw that one was the 28th rule of acquisition. It never hurts to suck up to the boss.
Yeah.
No, obviously that's a Star Trek reference for those who don't know. And now I've outed myself as a complete and utter nerd. But but really, it kind of some of going through the list of the laws and trying to learn a little bit about them. It kind of made me think about that a little bit. That because in Star Trek, the Ferengi who use the rules of acquisition are there to accumulate power and wealth, primarily wealth, but yeah, and they obviously aren't concerned with the good of other people, which can certainly change whether or not power is a good or a bad thing. But yeah, always make those who are above you feel comfortable, with you. That you're not there to replace them. Of course, I totally believe that everybody should be endeavoring to make themselves not irreplaceable, but indispensable. And the going the opposite way there definitely can go a long way to making one uncomfortable with those around you.
Yeah.
And so if you've got a leader, if you've got a boss who doesn't want to be replaced, who's worried about being replaced, then you definitely need to follow this law of power.
Yeah. David, what do you think?
Yeah, I've got the book in front of me, and I'm just looking at that, and he talks about just that point, Bill, what you were talking about, where he says that there are masters who are more insecure than others. So if there's a big insecurity there by that person, they're going to be threatened by you. And sometimes I found that I may inadvertently, not purposely, like Outshine, I'm just trying to do my job. I remember working at the county of Riverside many years ago. They're like, "Hey, keep it down. You're doing too many things." I'm like, I didn't even realize, like, you're trying like, and I was like, interesting. So there was a hierarchy there and a certain things, and I wasn't trying to outshine them, but there was. Are you clued into what you're saying, Bill? Are you clued into somebody's insecurities or where they fit in there, or can you provide reassurance and understanding where they're coming from or what they're dealing with, perhaps, and say, "Hey, I'm coming here to support you," and actually shine together, right? Versus them feeling inferior, like, "Oh my goodness, this person's trying to make my role, overtake me," kind of a thing. And so that idea of never outshine your master. And the other thing I thought was really interesting here in the book, where he says, just because your master loves you, or maybe you have a boss that really cares for you and like that too, that you can do anything you want either. You just can't just keep going like, "Oh, I can just get away with everything." Like, no, you've got to make sure you're not, putting them in a bad light because the way you're trying to go after certain things. So those are a couple of things that jumped out at me, Doxy.
Yeah, it's really fascinating, and it kind of what you touched on a little bit, David, is kind of jumping into law number 2. But before we do that, any last thoughts on law number 1, Bill?
Well, we should. Yeah, I just keep coming back to indispensable versus irreplaceable. Most people don't think that if they're irreplaceable, they can't be promoted. They can't go anywhere. And certainly not up. And but being indispensable to a company is a completely different thing. It means they can't afford to get rid of you. It doesn't mean that they have to keep you in the same position. And if you're comfortable with being replaceable, then you're comfortable with training those who are under you. So it's really easy to figure out if your master, as it were, is comfortable with being replaced because they're training you to do their job. And so keep an eye out for that.
That's a good point. And David, you mentioned something. I'll tell you, and this is what I tell people that are working the 8 to 5, looking for management and even their culture. You have to find a way to make yourself so valuable
Mm.
that they can't get rid of you.
Mm-hmm.
And if they do get rid of you, guess what? You become their competition. And
Mm-hmm.
that's what you do. So when you understand this law number one, yeah, you don't want to outshine the master. However, you want to make yourself so valuable that the master himself or herself can't get rid of you.
Oh man, Dr. Curtis, you just struck a mind as you said that, because I was talking to a client today, and we're talking about like teaming agreements and coming together, right? Where you're going after certain work.
Right.
Now there's a certain prime contractor, there's subcontractors. To your very point, you cannot outshine the prime if they're the fronting it. How do you come together, unify, support that prime? If you try to overtake, or it doesn't work well, because there's a hierarchy there. You got to understand that, and how everybody it's like kind of the position on the team. If everyone tries to be the quarterback, or everybody tries to be the wide receiver, nobody wins. It's like, okay, trying to grab the glory, right? It's like, okay, where is our position? How do we support each other? And understanding that. And I just that, as you said that really struck to me as a real applicable thing here. Those that are listening here on the Business Roundtable podcast, is that we're trying to help you use these and understand these laws so you can be effective in leading your company, leading your team. So absolutely. Great observation.
Yeah. All right, let's jump into number two. Now, years ago when I read this book, number two, I was kind of taken back by it a little bit, but because then I understood it. And law number two says, never put too much trust in friends. Learn how to use your enemies. Now, let me read this part. It says, hire a former enemy, and he will be more loyal than a friend, because he has more to prove, he or she. In fact, you have more to fear from friends than from enemies. If you have no enemies, find them. And what's really interesting to me is that as I looked at that and even looked at old friends, new friends, people I graduated from high school, college, whatever, it dawned on me that more of my friends developed more, shall I say, envy or jealousy of even the success or lack thereof, because we all fight struggles with the word success. But and the enemies that I thought I had became more of my assets to grow my business. And that's just my personal note. What I've noticed about this law number two, it is very effective if you understand that your enemy is going to help you more so than your friend. Your thoughts on that, Dave?
Man, interesting. That yeah, I think my initial response is the same as yours as I hear this, Oxy, and I am processing that. There's a thing about working situations, and that I think that's what I'm reading here and understanding a little bit, is like, it says like, keep friends for friendship, but work with your skilled and work with the skilled and the competent. So sometimes, again, like those enemies, they're quote unquote enemies. They're trying to be very highly skilled and adept at trying to doing these things right. Because if they are truly the enemy, if you're at war, we lost Oxy again. We'll hopefully get him back in a minute. But I'm thinking this is an interesting concept, because you're trying to get that highly skilled. And I maybe sports is a good analogy. Like if you're playing, right, Bill, somebody that is another team player on the opposite team that's super good, probably want them on my team, versus a friend from the stands or something that is not, that say, playing the game like I am playing, right?
Right. Well, I think the key on this one is too much.
Mm.
It's not never put trust in friends. It's never
Hmm.
put too much trust in friends.
Hmm.
Um, and I've heard it put another way as never trust an honest man.
Okay.
That honest people, you can't trust them because they must be hiding something. Um,
Hmm.
but you know but a dishonest man is always lying to you, and so you can at least trust that.
Yeah. It's so
So
counterintuitive when I
mhm,
when I when I read this chapter and I think about it, but I think as I'm looking at this, you know, he gives examples throughout this book of one of them I'm just pulling up. It says in 1971 during the Vietnam War, Henry Kissinger was the target of an unsuccessful kidnapping attempt, um,
mhm,
and it talks about his whole experience there with these kidnappers and how um, how they were um, plotting here and understanding that whole process of these enemies trying to get him. Like, how do they figure this out? How do they, you know, um, they obviously wasn't successful, but he's trying to understand. Oh man, these guys are really smart in how to do this stuff.
mhm.
You know, uh, so it does definitely cause me to think and pause and think about like, oh man, how is this, you know, true? Because again, it's like when you read it from the beginning, when you read this law, never to put too much in trust in friends, you're like, don't I trust like my friends? Don't I trust my friends? But learn how to use enemies. And it's interesting that I think the language use them. It doesn't mean they're your friends. The enemies are not your friends. It
Right,
just means that that you may be using them to help you.
right, right. Um, and maybe if different terms were used, like never put too much trust in allies, learn how to use opponents.
Yeah.
Maybe something along those lines might be a little more palatable. But another thought I'd had on that is sometimes friends take you for granted. It's a
Mm,
great way to ruin a friendship, but yeah, when you trust your friends, they might too much.
mhm.
They might just take you for granted and take you for all you're worth. You know.
Absolutely.
Yeah, I mean, anyway, as I was saying, back in my younger days, this would have been back in the '90s, and um, I had a we interviewed a roommate, and everybody thought he was a great guy, and we had a lot in common. And and long story short, he ended up taking me for $3,000
Oh man.
because I trusted him too much. It wasn't in cash; it was primarily in bills that he ended up leaving me with when he moved out of the house. So,
Yeah. I
um,
do
so
I do have a question for Doc C because one of the things here, and you guide businesses as I do, like on hiring or bringing in key
Sure.
people. And one
Uh-huh.
of them it says, it says when you decide to hire a friend, you gradually discover the qualities he or she has kept hidden. So, like, we've heard the pitfalls of like hiring friends, right, in the business.
Right. Here's my whole take and summary of this particular law is it's really not so much about friends or enemies, really. It's how an individual can judge who is best, whether it is a friend or an enemy, able to further your interests
Mm,
in the company or in a situation. That's how I look at this law. But Bill made a point on the friendship, and that sometimes friendship, it's hard to differentiate between we're friends or business, because there's a big difference between the two. And that's why sometimes I even tell people, keep your friends as friendship. That's great. But work with the people that are skilled and competent. And David, you mentioned something about, you used sports analogy. And that's really true. Because in sports, there is a goal. And the goal is, I don't care, just do your job. I'm not your friend. I remember reading an article about the Chicago Bulls, Scottie Pippen, Michael Jordan, and Dennis Rodman. I actually played basketball against Dennis Rodman. And one of the things that I learned in that article and what I was studying the Bulls is that those three, they weren't friends. They never even talked to one another off the court at all. I don't know if anybody knew that, but they did what this law number 2 is all about, and that is how that individual is going to carry on my interest, and that is to win a championship.
Yeah.
Thoughts?
Well, really, if you look at things, everyone is at their core selfish, self-centered, self-serving.
Yes.
And the only in ethics it's called egoism, and the only thing that you can get beyond that. And I actually ruined an ethics class once because I proved that there was nothing but egoists in the world. Is the enlightened egoist, and that's the egoist who understands that in general the well-being of another person or other people is actually in their best interest. The old saying of a rising tide can lift all boats. So yeah, we're all essentially out for ourselves, whatever our ethical platform happens to be.
Bill, that's an excellent point, though. I mean, that's exactly why we're going through this, because to understand this idea of power. But you are absolutely right. You can't do anything by yourself. Period.
No.
You need help, and how you do that is really understand these laws of power, understand culture, understand ethics. All those things that you mentioned is really you're gathering tools. Those that are listening to this, this podcast, is you're gathering tools to better your career. Because yes, we are self-centered, selfish people. Period. Any last thoughts, David, before we go to number 3?
No, I'm excited to actually jump into number 3. I think,
okay. Yeah, it's and Bill touched a little bit about.
Oh no,
and we lost him again.
We keep losing. We keep, for some reason, we keep losing Curtis. We've had a weird connection tonight, and we're getting right into Law 3: conceal attention. Conceal your intentions.
Conceal your intentions.
Conceal
this sounded
them.
very this sounded very military to me. With there he is.
He's back. There we go. We just had to wait and announce it for you, and he's back.
Yeah, tell you what, I don't know what the deal is. So you announced conceal your intentions.
Yeah, and conceal your intentions. Yes.
Yes. Okay. So in kind of paraphrasing what this is all about, use decoyed objects and desires and red herrings to throw people off the scent of what you're actually trying to do. Hide your intentions, not by closing up, okay, but by talking endlessly about your desires and goals. I was really kind of interested in this when I first saw it myself. Bill, what's your thoughts on concealing your intentions to graduate from college?
Well, it doesn't really. It really doesn't make any sense to conceal that particular intention, because
that's true.
I can't imagine anybody being against me doing that. but I could see somebody using one's intention to say write a book series against them, or take that idea from them, or or foul up your plans because they don't want you to succeed, because your success means their failure, at least in their minds. You know, but yeah, as I was about to say, concealing your intentions. It made me think of the military and segmentation of projects. Sequestering different groups. Who saw Oppenheimer? That great example, the Manhattan Project. Everybody was kept hidden. Everybody's intentions and plans and projects and what they were supposed to be doing was kept hidden from the other people, so they didn't really know. Nobody knew really what was going on except for the people at the very top. And so it can be a good thing. If your plans and intentions are something that can easily be derailed by someone, by a friend or enemy or frenemy.
Dave, what do you think?
Yeah, again, this initially is, I kind of had that same reaction in the first one. Like, what do you mean conceal my intentions? But I when you say like the military bill, that resonates, and they talk about a bit about that in the book. And so you have to I mean, they do this in sports all the time, right? So you're playing, you don't want them to know your play, right? You're trying to throw them off. I'm thinking about football, like run somebody else there, and they're like, oh, they're not doing that, but I thought they were going to do that, right? So if you think of it as a game, and I really enjoy watching the show Survivor. If you guys ever watched the TV show Survivor, there's a whole lot of this in that show. Because you're playing a game and you're trying to like, well, what am I trying? What's the end goal here? So I think you have to understand what, like you said, what the intention is. I think that's important to me. And I think also I flip it around, and I think, and what I like about the book too, Curtis, is they and oftentimes they talk about the reversal of this as well. But how do you then protect yourself, or how do you detect when somebody is trying to conceal? So they're using a power against you, essentially, right? How can you identify that power and say, oh man, and especially if it's malicious intent, right, Bill? It's a malicious intent to conceal their intentions. So how can we be mindful and pick up on that? I think that there's some really good telltale signs they put in the book here of like how can you recognize that when somebody's using a power against you, so to speak.
I love sports analogies for these laws, because if you're in basketball, there's 5 players. That's it. There's only 5 players that get to start. I want to be a starter, and all of them do. And by the way, if you're a coach, you want all of them to think that way. And it goes back to the San Francisco Niners, Joe Montana, when Steve Young was on the bench, and Joe Montana was playing. I don't know if you remember those years.
I do remember those days.
Yeah, and Joe Montana wouldn't talk to Steve Young, and because they're so competitive, but Joe Montana knows that Steve Young wants his position, and that's the purpose of really these laws, is that you cannot run a company forever. You cannot be the president of a company forever. You can only be a president for 4 years. So knowing both sides of the coin, the intentions, and that's why Bill said earlier, is that you really want to train people to take your position over, because not only do you make your company stronger, more valuable, but people will see the value in itself when you become less selfish in that regard. Would you agree with that, Bill? What's your thoughts on that?
Yeah, because you want to be able to be replaced so you can move on to bigger and better things, whether that's within a company or outside of a company, or with a different company, with your own company, with retirement, whatever it is you've got in mind that you can move on to. So you need to you need to be able to train somebody in how to do your job. So
Good.
but so I guess in a way there's got to be somebody you tell some of your plans to, or at least your operational effectivenesses, um, and and be able to just be able to move on to the next thing.
Yeah. David, any last thoughts on law number 3?
Oh man, there's so much in here. I really like digging into this one because it does challenge your at least for me, challenges my natural kind of thoughts on this. Like, I want to share and be open to things, but then there's a place here to be wise about how you're sharing things. Okay, here's an example. Or like, this is social engineering, which I think is very interesting nowadays. I saw this on social media. Have you guys ever seen this in post? It says, post your favorite colors, post your where you've lived in how many places, post this, right? They ask you all these personal questions. Have you guys seen those posts, right? Respond to this.
Yeah.
Well, and then I saw this police post recently on it and it said, stop giving away your personal information to thieves that are trying to break your account. They're deceiving their intentions to get your information. They're like, oh, this is innocuous, this is fun, right? So again,
that goes back to rule 2.
yeah. Yeah,
Putting
friends
too
and
much
enemies.
trust in your friends.
Right, you're trusting them, and they're like, hey, you're looking at me, and they're not clued in there. So to me, I apply this rule more, I mean, as to I need to be aware of those that are concealing their intentions, and there's so much of it today. In fact, I just even had somebody try to fool me on Facebook Marketplace trying to buy something, and they're like, "Where is this?" It was just this whole level. Like it was all really drawn out, like these messages back and forth. It was well done. I'm like, wait a minute, something's off here. So it's just again, I like the flip side too of it, like watching out who's using this power. Even I'm not intending to, and just guard yourself, be aware. So that's really my big takeaway on this, Doxy.
That's very good. I always tell everybody to be an absolute skeptic on everything.
Yeah.
For sure.
Yeah.
Well, let's dive into number 4 here. David, I'll start with you, but it says always say less than necessary. When I looked at this, I kind of that's kind of the way I've been throughout my career. Because once the word whatever you say is out, you can't take it back.
Right.
So tell me a little bit about what your thoughts are on law number 4. Always say less than necessary.
Oh man, what's Bill might know this. There's a Bible verse that talks about, if you speak, you remove all doubt that you're a fool. If you're quiet, they don't know.
I was just writing that down, but I don't think it's biblical. But
something like that.
It's better to keep your mouth shut than open it, and it's better to keep your mouth shut and be thought a fool than to open it and remove all doubt.
Yeah, remove all doubt. Yes.
What's interesting, just to chime in on that, is I should have opened up law number 4 with what I've taught my kids, and that is before you speak, just remember these 3 things. Number 1, is it factual? Number 2, is it necessary? Number 3, is it kind? I go, if you follow those 3, you'll be fine. So most of the time they don't talk, because most of the time they realize that I don't know if what I'm about ready to say is factual or not. But that's what I taught my kids from day one.
No, that's absolutely factual, necessary, kind. I've been in I don't know if anyone's ever been in a meeting with a lawyer, like they're legally sitting, right?
Yeah.
Like, hold on, is this on the record? Is this, let's make sure And I remembered it quite distinctly. I was at the county of Riverside many years ago, and I was sitting there with a senior level person, and we're at this table, and we start talking, and he gently puts his hand on me, and like, he didn't have to do this, but I knew it was like, okay, stop talking right now, and let's do a little bit more listening. And so, yes, I think it's better. We got 2 ears and 1 mouth. Let's do a little bit more listening than speaking.
Yeah. I've gotten quite a bit better since starting grad school at being more succinct, saying more with less. I've always said that I love efficiency in engineering, and now I'm doing it in writing as well.
Mm-hmm.
That's good. Your thoughts, Bill? Any other thoughts on law number 4?
Let me see here. Yeah, just no. I mean, really, saying what is necessary, I think would be a better way to put it. Only say what is necessary, and as opposed to less than necessary. Because if it's less than necessary, you're not going to be understood in the first place.
Yeah, that makes sense. David, any other thoughts on law?
One thing that comes to mind. So one of the things I do in my coaching program is we do a return and report. We ask guys, where are you at on different areas? And the guys that are very succinct and boom, like, hey, this would happen, boom, I pretty much know they're on target and making the moves they need to move. When the guys start talking for a long time and go on and on, I'm like, okay, you're something off here. You're not doing the work. You're trying to justify, you're trying to come up with things. So it's a telltale sign to me. And you're not coming from a place of power. You're actually coming from a place of a weakness or a deficit, and you're trying to like come up with all these stories and make up all these things to justify where and why you're at. So if you can say things succinctly, and this goes for writing too, trying to be more to the point. If you see something really wordy, I'm sure you're a writer, Bill. So are you, Doc C, right? Can you make that as succinct as possible, and people can take it in, or you're just trying to go on and on and on, and you lose them. So to me, it shows the grasp of the question or what you're trying to answer.
It's interesting that how you said that, Dave, because I'll sit in meetings and you'll get the 1 or 2 or 3 individuals that just talk and talk. And so what I have to do if I'm running the meeting is I have to turn around and I always have to ask for clarification, because, well, hang on, I'd have to stop them and say, because they bounce from one topic to the next instead of staying on target. Mm-hmm. Less is more, for sure. So you know that when people do that, that is a sign, I think, of I don't necessarily mean weakness, but it's really a sign that they can't stay on task on what we're trying to do, for sure.
Right. They're not coming from a place of power and certainty and clarity.
Yeah,
right?
Clarity. And clarity, in my opinion, is power. And I like that. I really do.
Mm-hmm. So, I mean, I think this is a good telltale sign. So if you're doing that, right, if you're that person, like you said, actually going on and on in the meeting, you might want to be quiet and think through this a little bit more.
Exactly.
And, so I think these are great. I mean, these are great. There's so much in here.
Yeah, there really is. Let's dive into one last one.
Okay.
Number 5, and then we'll stop at number 5 because, like I said, there's so much, and we're almost out of time here. But law number 5: so much depends on reputation. Guard it with your life. This, to me, I just knew already from my upbringing and whatnot. But I'm going to start with you, David. Before I do, I think that this law number 5 is, your reputation is sacred in my opinion, and you have to guard it with your life. And even the skeletons that we all have, you keep them in the closet.
Oh no, and we just lost Oxy. We have to have him come back again.
Oh no.
He just he left it. He leaves us on a hanging here on this one. You know, this idea of so much depends on your reputation. Guard it. We'll hopefully get Doxy back in a minute, because I do think here he comes. We
Tell you, I don't know.
There we go. We're gonna.
I have never experienced this before. I don't know.
I know we've had you on so many times.
Look,
It's like
you know,
the truth can't get out. No, we're gonna get out.
It started when I was in backstage. Nobody let me in.
Well, we're glad you're here. We're glad you're back, and you were saying, that so much depends on this.
On the reputation, yeah, absolutely. I think that you guard it with your life for sure. And I'll tell you why. Because people sometimes will listen to others speak, and they think it's factual. You know, if I'm sitting here talking, and let's say Charlie Chin's not on this call, and I'm sitting here talking about Charlie Chin, about all these things he did, and he's not here to defend himself. You see, and yet you, Bill, or David, you might think, well, gosh, whatever. Since Curtis might be an authoritative figure, I got to believe what he's saying about Charlie Chin, which is absolutely crazy, but that's how people are. So that's what I mean by guarding that reputation with all your life. What's your thoughts on that, Bill?
Yeah, go ahead, Bill.
I don't remember the exact quote, but it was something Warren Buffett said about that we can lose all the money, but we can't afford to lose a single bit of our reputation.
Yeah, that's true.
And
that's a good one.
Yeah, it's your reputation is similar to time, because it can take a long time to build a reputation, and a moment to ruin it. And of course, we all know that time is the only thing you can't get back, no matter how hard you try. So,
good point.
And reputation, it took 20 years to build it, 2 minutes to ruin it, and another 20 years maybe to get it back.
Yeah.
Yeah, that's a good point. David, what's your thoughts?
I like that this talks about your maintaining a reputation that is of your creation. And it talks about how, in some ways it can double your strength, in other ways it can send people scurrying away. So the same exact deeds, I think this talks about this here, appear brilliant or dreadful, can be entirely on the reputation of the doer. So what I think is, you have to know how to get that out there, get that information out there. I can't remember. There's movies on this. There's all sorts of different things, but there's different ways you can go about it. So how you present that same information, right? So, for example, I'll just use an example of say you made a mistake or you lost money on a project, and that's like, oh my goodness, this test doesn't know how to run a project. However, you could say, I learned from how I lost that money and I grew a company and I was able to turn it. So yes, if you just looked at that one thing, is that he was mismanaged money, your reputation, but if you could say, I learned from that and how I applied that and how I made more money later on. So it's all about how we create that story and understanding of what we did, how it came to us, right? And I think that's really important, because if you don't do it, like you just said, Doxy, somebody else is going to come up and say, well, this is my reputation. And if you have never addressed it, you have never been able to create and embrace that, then you're left to somebody else's reputation. Like you're leaving yourself unguarded.
This law number 5, and you two probably relate to this. I think this is politics 101.
Oh yeah,
for sure. I mean, because when you see the politicians, Democrat, Republican, whatever it is, in their debates, they attack one another like dogs, and it really helps their rating when they attack, and their attack doesn't come with a rebuttal, you know. So it's quite fascinating to watch debates. I like watching debates. It's kind of funny to see how this law number 5 plays out.
Yeah, absolutely. Because one way they're trying to present it one way, and then the other person's saying, "Well, no, it's actually this." And so, you know, it's like you said, this who's running toward that and who's running away from it. You know,
Yeah.
but I think you do have to guard yourself, and unfortunately, there's a lot. I find the more you're on the proactive side versus being defensive and having to come out after it. I think it's better if you can lead with it and get that out there and present the story rather than you know, hiding it. So if something, in my experience, the more you can own what might be perceived as negative or off-putting, but then take that and apply that to creation of like, I'm guarding it and then I'm taking it, and how am I learning from this, or how has this affected me in a positive way, versus trying to uh maybe that's the best way I see of being guarding it. That's where I've seen success in the reputation,
Yeah.
versus trying to I don't know, try to minimize or keep quiet, if you will, because people are very persistent, or they're going to come up with their own stories. But it's better for you, I believe, right?
Yeah. Yeah, absolutely.
To bring it out and address it.
Well, not to close it, but we have tackled the first 5. We have 43 left. Any last thoughts, Bill? We'll start with you. Any last thoughts about the first?
The one thought I got popping into my head is, if you don't learn how to use power, somebody else will, and they might not use it for as much good as you do.
That's an excellent point. David, any last thoughts?
Man, I really appreciate how it challenges my thinking and the way the words are presented, and it's like, okay, wait a minute, I gotta reorient myself. It's like if you've ever seen a world map and you see it flipped upside down, you're like, what is this? That's what I feel a little bit of, like, in a good way. It's scrambling my brain a little bit, like challenging me to think about this a little differently than I have before. And I'm excited for future episodes to go and discuss more of these laws. Actually,
You know, that's the excellent point, though, really, because when you first read this book, it's going to do that to you. It did that to me as well. It made me rethink some things. Like, well, wait a minute. My friends, that friends issue. It's like, I can't trust my friends. It was quite interesting to me, and I can't wait to actually get a chance to dive into the other 43. So thank you. I thank you allowing me to run this meeting, and I can't wait to do it again if we get.
No, thank you so much. Thanks for
this is great.
Just leading the conversation tonight, Doxy.
You bet. My pleasure.
So we will do more episodes of this. So please listen, subscribe, follow along. We welcome your comments. Of course, if we love a 5-star review on any of your favorite podcast platforms, or if you're catching us on LinkedIn or YouTube, please share and invite others to listen in. If you're interested in joining us as a guest speaker, we would love to have you and talk with you about that. Reach out to Bill, Doxy, and myself with any questions regarding, hey, are you effectively applying these powers or not, and how we can maybe be able to help you. We'd love to hear from you. So thanks, guys.
Thank you. Have a great
night.
Thank you. You too.